All right, well, thanks to all of you who get the prize for finding the new location. We're here at the Grand Hyatt, and I know we'll have people coming in during the next half hour with traffic and what have you. So, but we'd like to go ahead and get started. We have a terrific panel discussion with us that I know we're very excited to hear at 4:30. So we do have some business that we wanted to talk about. I'm Dan Chenok. I'm the chair of the Industry Advisory Council and the Executive Committee. And on behalf of the Executive Committee, I wanted to welcome everybody to this November membership meeting, the final membership meeting of 2014. And we wanted to talk about a few things in advance of the panel and then get right on to the business at hand. First of all, to those of you that are here for the first time or just getting to know ACT-IAC, we've really had a busy year. Looking back, as it is our last meeting, we just wanted to kind of reflect on some very successful conferences that many of you have been involved in or have had a chance to go to: the Management of Change Conference, the Acquisition Excellence Conference, and the Small Business Conference, which were in the spring, and of course, just last month, our Executive Leadership Conference, which drew about 800 people from government and industry around a terrific set of activities, and we'll talk about that momentarily. We're also getting going on next year's versions of these, and so we hope to see you there as well. And we've got a number of the conference planning leaders here in the room with us who hopefully at the networking hour you can have a chance to talk with as well. We also had a really successful shared services forum attended by about 200 people from government and 200 from industry, at which we really talked about that critically important area that we continue the discussion around the Executive Leadership Conference. We've had a tremendous relationship and connectivity with the Executive Committee from the American Council for Technology, the government side of the ACT-IAC equation. And Rick Holgate, who is the ACT chair, I know will be here shortly, and the ACT Executive Committee have really been working closely and creating the benefit that we all derive from having this collaborative tissue that's at the fabric of the value proposition that ACT-IAC provides. Finally, we've really been working to get to get close to some of the administration's key initiatives, including the work that's being done through the GSA 18F program, the OMB US Digital Service, and other innovation programs like that. We've had a number of instances where they have joined us at conferences where we've got some initiatives going on, so I've written some papers for them to help them frame their activities. So we really, as an association, have had a lot of impact, a tremendous amount of activity during the year, and much of that is due to you here in the room and your many colleagues who have made this successful, volunteering your time to help government, which is our mission. So thanks to you for that. And I'd now like to advance the slides briefly. Casey, I think do we have the slides moving? Okay. Yes, no? All right. Well, while we're waiting for the slides to advance, I want to actually say that since our last meeting, one of the things that we do as an association, of course, is bring in new members. And there are a number of members that have joined the association since our last meeting. I'm just going to read their names so that you'll know who they are, and you can, if some of them are here, you can talk to them at the networking hour or recognize them when they do join. Beyond Trust, the Chamber Corporation, Cherry Beckert, GovReady, the Insignia Technology Services, and here we are, IT Cadre, JCA, KYM Advisors, Lookout Mobile Security, SkyPoint Decisions, Telcordia Technologies, and the Veris Group. So let's give a big hand to the new members. And we do welcome them. I would like to reverse a slide for momentarily. To just talk a little bit about the Executive Leadership Conference, if we can go backwards. Is that feasible? Or did we skip it? And there we are. Okay. So how many people here actually were at ELC? All right, so about 2/3 of the room. So for those of you that were there, you saw that there was a lot of new energy and new dynamism. And we had a terrific leadership team. Kathy Coles, who I think is here with us, and Adrian Gardner, the government chair, led a terrific effort of about 80 or so volunteers. You see here some of the highlights from that conference. For those of you that were there, you'll remember what those looked like. We had two very active tracks each focused around a cross-agency priority goal of the administration in citizen services, which led to actually the development of a task force, which you'll soon see some announcements about in terms of a call for volunteers that's being led by the past chair of IAC, Jim Williams, and a GSA leader in customer service activity, Martha Doris, to think how can we as an association work to support the administration's cross-agency goal in this area. The shared solutions track, thinking about taking shared services to the next level in terms of providing solutions, moving shared services to the mission space. We've already engaged with OMB, and the leader of the shared services activities there, Dave Nader, has benefited and appreciated the input that came from ELC already, and has complemented that to us in his commentary. And then finally, collaboration ELC. Those of you that were in what I'll call the 21st Century Tech Expo part of ELC this year really saw a tremendous opportunity to bring together lots of really exciting topics in a very fast-paced fashion that led to a tremendous amount of content using human-centered design thinking to bring things together in a short period of time that were of great value to our government colleagues in many different ways. And you see here some of the many topics that were covered in that track, that all of which, to some extent or another, or many of which, focused on a third cross-agency priority goal around smarter IT delivery, which of course many of us support in our work in government and industry. So we're going to continue to look at how to enhance and improve the collaborative element, not just of ELC, but also of the other conferences that we have. If those of you that were there heard the forecast of the Management of Change Conference as a big giant hackathon, so the chairs of that conference, Sunny Hashmi and Kavita Kalator, will be leading a great effort on that, and we'll look forward to that in the spring. And then finally, of course, Beth Colbert gave the Monday night keynote, the #2 official at OMB, and she challenged the organization to develop some responses to some key questions that she had. We're actually meeting with Beth, a group of us, tomorrow morning, and her senior staff, to talk about what came out of that conference so that Beth can take the input and help OMB frame their priorities going forward. So for any of you that put sticky notes on the paper or might have written into the web application to respond to the challenges, your comments are really very much part of the material that we will provide back to OMB. So thanks for that collaborative effort. Before we leave ELC, I do have the pleasure of recognizing two very important people. I know one of whom's here. I'm not sure the other one's here. Kathy Coles, are you here? Kathy, come. And now, I don't know if Adrian Gardner's here, but Kathy and Adrian really led a phenomenal effort to change the dynamic of ELC, and they had great support, but really the vision was theirs. And we owe them a debt of gratitude because they've really helped us improve as an association in how we use this signature conference as a means of creating content to really drive forward the government agenda. So those of us on the executive committee wanted to recognize you and the great work that you did, and congratulate you as the co-chair from industry for this year's Executive Leadership Conference. Congratulations to you. And Adrian Gardner. Accepting the award on Adrian's behalf will be Kathy Coles. All right. Let's see, what's next? So we do want to, as many of you know, we have, as part of our professional development activities, the ACT-IAC Academy, which provides just a terrific set of classes to grow and learn from. We wanted to show here some of the upcoming classes that are happening. You can sign up on the ACT-IAC website, and you see here some of those activities when you're not going to holiday parties and you want to enrich some of the learning that you're doing in these areas. We will have this available also on the ACT-IAC website in terms of what's available when, so please feel free to go to the website, sign up. Rabiah Sutton, who is one of the leaders of that activity, and Jim Beaupre, who is the staff director of that activity, neither of them could be here today, but they wanted me to call these to your attention and to encourage you and your colleagues and your staffs to attend if at all possible. Okay? professional development continuum, if you will, at ACT-IAC, which is really to enrich the workforce, includes the academy and includes a number of programs. Many of you have been involved in these programs. The programs include the partners, which are newly rising executives, entry-level SES in the government and their equivalent in industry. The Voyagers, who are sort of, mid-level career managers who are looking to rise in their careers, both in government and industry. A new program that we'll be introducing next year at the very senior levels called Champions, which is for very senior executives in both elements, and this program, the Associates program, which is really for people that are early in their career, that are rising stars, that are looking to make a difference. ACT-IAC a couple of years ago created this program to provide an opportunity for people that are starting their careers to contribute, to generate opportunities to give back, to move beyond their agency or their company and start a career path that leads to exciting opportunities to work together and to work across the association. And so it is a great pleasure for me to introduce Kim Pack, one of the chairs, who will take you through the graduation of this year's Associates class. Kim?
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my distinct pleasure to be able to be here today to welcome our graduating class of the Associates. The ACT-IAC Associates program is a 9-month professional development program for professionals early in their career from both government and industry. We are very happy you are here to share in this celebration with us and really come to celebrate the unique and distinct personalities of each one of our 21 associates. This year's members have been vigilant in their journey through the Associates program by learning principles of the business world. We've learned managing up, sideways, and down. We've learned how to network, so we've done the essentials of networking. We've had public speaking, and we've also actually started our own businesses. So we've really went through a whole gamut of business principles, but building on the actual success of the Partners and Voyagers programs, the Associates' objective is to introduce our early career professionals to leadership concepts and how to position themselves for future leadership roles. With that, we built on the success of the 2013 class, and a shout out to Rory. We built on that success by adding an emerging technologies class and our first annual chili cook-off. And I want to congratulate Ryan Tran, who had never made chili in his life, who won and is the reigning champ of the chili cook-off. Sorry, Dare. And so with that, first I'd like to go ahead and talk a little bit about the things that we got to do. I, as an individual, got to know this class through our program activities. I got to do some really fun one-on-one travel to Boston, travel to Williamsburg. We got to do some fun hiking. We had laser tag and happy hours, and we really tried to connect on a personal level inside and outside of the program. And with that, we also got our first baby of the Associates class of 2039. Thank you, Summer. And with that, we actually got to do a baby shower. We've had major milestones in this class. We had an early wedding, Kelly Duty, UVA wedding. We had a summer wedding with Lauren Sapp. And now we're awaiting the big wedding of December for Brian Cohen. So we've had some major milestones in the program and outside of the program. But with that, let me turn your attention just for a moment on the coaches. I would like to thank the coaches for all of their support through this whole class. Jessica Cassidy, who actually stepped up to work with me as the government chair this summer. I'd like to go ahead and talk a little bit about Malcolm Harden, Barry Levine, Corey Mickens, Daryl Peak, Greg Summer, and David Yang. Your creativity in the programs and the activities throughout the year truly made this a successful year for the 21 associates. And we really appreciate your commitment, the time, and your resources to do this. So thank you very much. I'd also like to give a big shout out to Mrs. Marietta Allen, who started this journey with us and for reasons, retirement, could not finish the program with us. So we wanted to thank her. She was a big part of this in the beginning, and we wanted to recognize her as well during this graduating class. With that, it is time to officially graduate the Associates class of 2014. This also marks a beginning and a little bit of sadness on my part. I don't get to regularly see the associates moving forward, but we will stay in touch. But it starts a new chapter in their lives as the second class to join the associates alumni. Now, we would like to recognize each of our graduates. Please stand as I say your name and stay standing. Brian Cohen, Brittany Deal, Dominic DiBiaso, Kelly Duty, Jessica Galindo, Rachel Gillerling, Ian Holman, Julie Keefe, Julie Metlaga, Amber Mays, Maria Mazel, Robert Noel, Christina Pickles, Christina Reap, Sarah Roble, Jared Rowan, Lauren Sapp, Tamika Simpson, Summer Smith, Ryan Tran, and Bill Uditsky. Congratulations, graduates. Each of you has successfully completed the requirements of the Associates program. Thank you so much. Now, we are going to finish with something special. Our graduating class actually had a project, and it was a PSA announcement for the Associates class. We'd like to share that with the general membership now. Thank you so much.
Hello. It's been great getting connected through the ACT-IAC Associates program. You know, starting out in the workforce environment can be tough to really get to know people and learn how to be successful. But through the Associates program, it's been easy. I've made some strong and lasting friendships, like my friend Winter over here. We've become so close. While we've been able to connect with others that have similar experience and career goals, it's really been a great experience for Autumn and I to learn more about personal branding, public speaking, gamification, and many other objectives.
It's Summer. My name is Summer. But yes, learning how to incorporate these key elements into help us further our career has been very beneficial for us all. We've been able to brainstorm and collaborate on ideas structured around leadership. Having met through the Associates program, Byron and I are now great friends.
Brian.
Good morning, everyone. How are you this morning?
Hi.
Could you press 7, please? How was your weekend? Good. Have a good day, everyone. Not a friendly group. There's plenty of other great people to choose from to work on the next project with me, though. Good morning, everyone. How are you today?
Good morning.
Oh, could you put 7, please?
Oh, sure.
How are you today?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm Tamika Simpson. I work on the 7th floor.
Julie, nice to meet
Nice
you.
to meet you, too.
Do you know Greg Summer on the 7th floor?
I do know Greg. We're working on a strategic plan
Oh,
together.
that's great. He's my ACT-IAC coach. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Oh,
it's been
that's
really great to know him.
I've heard so many good things about that program.
Yeah, it's been a great experience.
Good.
All right, have a great day.
You too.
Great to meet you.
Great to meet you, too.
We'll connect on LinkedIn.
Great. Have a good day.
Bye.
Pleasant person. I actually need some people to help me with some strategic planning work. I'll look up Julie on LinkedIn.
Bye, guys. Have a great day.
What do you think this ACT-IAC is? Should we look it up maybe? Maybe we should join.
Absolutely.
ACT-IAC Associates. What could I benefit from joining this program?
Wow, you could learn some team building skills in DC.
The Associates program? You're gonna get some really sweet swag.
Rising professionals in the government and private industry.
You'll master your public speaking skills. You'll learn about emerging new IT trends.
And you might win a chili contest.
And it looks like I could expand my network.
A lot of new friends.
You should definitely join. Do
You think
it.
so?
Absolutely.
All right, I'll definitely look into it. Thank you.
All right, well, congratulations again to the associates. Thanks again to the associates coaches. And now I think that we, without further ado, yes?
Can I just say one thing?
Mitzi.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. We're going to be, the applications for the next associate's class is going to be on December 2nd. And the partners application is going to be out this Friday. So for two of the professional development programs, look for those applications to be out there. And please get people in your companies and organizations to apply. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitzi. So Mitzi Mead, along with Roy Schultz, one of our two executive committee leaders of the professional development activities, and they can go to the ACT-IAC.org website to get everything they need, correct? The other thing I'd mention, Ken, is Ignite Innovation still open for? Midnight tomorrow. So those of you that have innovative activities and projects in your agencies or companies, if you want to nominate them for this year's Ignite Innovation Showcase, which was really successful last year, hundreds of people, Steve Van Rokel keynoted. We'll have another great event this year. Feel free to go to the website, send in those nominations. So it should be an exciting event again. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's panel. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to introduce the leader on the executive committee for the program committee, Debbie Granberry, Debbie has just done a phenomenal job this year in terms of putting together some really dynamic programs, and it's a great honor to introduce Debbie to the stage. Debbie, come on up.
Good afternoon. So I'm Debbie Granberry, and in my evening job is I'm on the executive committee for ACT-IAC, and I am one of the leaders on the program committee. So before I go into the program that we're going to do this evening, I do want to just put out a shout out for all the fun that we have on the program committee. We're always looking for volunteers, so if you want to hear more about joining that committee and participating and putting together great events like we're going to have this evening, please, stop by and talk to me or Marietta. Alan, I'll be here all evening. I'd love to have new faces join our committee. And tonight, or this evening, we are we're in for a great treat. We have all been hearing about government acquisition and hoping that it can get better. And we've been hearing more and more about this government acquisition marketplace. We want to hear this afternoon, what is that all about? A cross-government acquisition capability that brings together the whole federal market, not just civilian, not just defense, not just GSA, but how do we bring this market together so that we get better procurements, that the government saves more money, and gets better value for the dollars that they spend. So I'm going to introduce the moderator for the panel. I want to introduce Chris Ham. Chris is the newly minted director of FedSim. FedSim is an organization that assists in acquisitions and manages about $7 billion worth of acquisition. Chris and many of the folks that are on the panel are great friends to ACT-IAC, and so we thank you very much for joining us this evening.
All right, made it up there, good. Let's see if I can do this standing. I might have to sit down a little bit. So I'm hobbling around. I get to meet with a lot of leaders at GSA, and interestingly, a bunch of them were in boots over the last 2 months because they've all hurt their ankles, and I aspire to be an SES someday, so I figured no better way than to build empathy with the leadership, so this is just a prop. But in all seriousness, so I've spent 15 years in this market, all at this one place doing large acquisition. And one of the first things that surprised me is, like, from the outside looking in, everyone thinks, Well, it'd be easy, and the government should just consolidate and have, one source or, a limited number of sources for buying stuff. And it should be, a very obvious way of buying, the way that a normal private market would work. And then you get and spend some time and learn the rule book and learn about all of the nuances for how it operates. Then you realize, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So the idea is out there, but the execution is the interesting part that we're all focused on. So we want to put together a panel and have a variety of perspectives working through what's the overall administration's goal right now on how to get to a more effective value proposition for the government, and then go through the individual steps on what you're going to see as the program going forward from the perspective of OFPP, from GSA, and from DoD. The interesting for me is when they asked me to moderate this panel, in some way, each one of the panelists is either my customer or my boss, and I'm not sure if they realize that, so I get to ask them questions up here that I probably couldn't ask any other place, and so you will too. So I'd like to invite the panelists to come up and have a seat, and we'll go through some introductions.
Hello, Mary. How are you? Excellent.
We left you a seat.
Thank you. So I'm going to start standing, since the focus is on you guys, and then if it doesn't work out, then I'll sit down. We're going to go from concept, starting at OPP, down through GSA for implementation, and then to DoD on the buying and implementation side on one of the categories. So start with Leslie. Can you give me a quick second about how long you've been in this marketplace and what your role is at OFPP?
Oh gosh, I've been in this marketplace for a long time, so we won't give specifics on that one. But ever since I graduated from college, I've been working on acquisition issues. I'm the Deputy Administrator at the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, and we started strategic sourcing back about 10 years ago, and we are now morphing it into category management, and I look forward to talking about that today.
All right, so now on to Kevin and then Mary at GSA. What's your time at GSA and your role here in category management?
I've been at GSA for just over 3 years now, in the federal market space for 10 as a federal employee, and before that in the private sector and in the nonprofit sector with the World Bank. So my role in category management and CAP is I'm the new Deputy FAS Administrator, and I'm a big proponent right now of how we can work better together as a federal government to become the biggest buyer on the planet instead of 500 of the medium-sized buyers that we are today.
25 years, all of GSA, all doing IT and professional services acquisition. I started when I was 12, so
Yes.
But right now I run the Integrated Technology Services portfolio, which is all of the government-wide acquisition contracts and programs that support other federal, state, local buying entities for anything IT and telecommunications.
All right. And now Ken from DoD at DPAC.
I bring a unique perspective that's been colored by the fact that I have been in acquisitions since I got out of college, 26 years, but I was on the requirements side. I'm not a contracting officer, never led a contract, don't want to let a contract. But we recognize that in DoD, much of the unmanaged spend, which I focus in on services and strategic sourcing, is defined by the requirement. So while my boss is a contracting officer, in fact, the contracting officer for the Department of Defense, the voice that the requirements brings to the table is becoming louder and louder in the 10 years since I started with DON doing sourcing and have since moved to OSD.
All right, so the way this will work is I've got a series of questions that are going to give us the foundation and details on the plans, and then we're going to open up to the audience. If something is controversial in the middle and you feel like you need to check the panel and ask a question, we got roving microphones, so we can do that in the middle as well as at the end. So let's get started. First at the concept level here with Leslie at OFPP. So what is the current idea behind the word that we're using now for category management? What does that mean?
Sure, and let me start just very quickly, and I probably don't need to build the case for anybody in the room, but just very quickly, when we think about it, we've got 3,300 procuring offices. In some cases, we have as many as 2,200 contracts with the same vendor. We only have about 100 plus agencies, 24 CFO-elect agencies, and the top 5 or 6 agencies spend about 80 to 90% of the money. So when you start thinking about those numbers, you start thinking, well, we could be doing something better. So back in 2004, 2005, when we started strategic sourcing, we said, gosh, we can do better here. Let's do sourcing events where we bring the requirements together for unique sourcing solutions. That we made lots of good headway there. I think we formed some good relationships. I think we looked at things in a different way, and now we're morphing to category management. When you look at what the government buys, about $270 billion is common goods and services, things that almost every agency buys. And then, of course, we have mission unique and very specific kinds of things. But if you just focused on that $270 billion and started to put categories together, you've got IT hardware, you've got software, you've got human capital, training and development, you've got all kinds of common goods and supplies or goods and services that we buy all the time. Is there a better way to do it? Does it have to be one sourcing event? Or could it just be getting the smartest folks in the room who know how to buy that commodity or that category of goods or services, figuring out what are the best practices, what does it mean to be best in class, to have a vehicle produce the best value, who are the smartest people, who's done this before, what are the prices that are being paid, not necessarily negotiated, but what are the prices being paid, what do we need to know about that market to buy in the best way. And as Kevin said, if we're buying in a stovepipe sort of independent way, we're never going to leverage the collective wisdom. And there are a lot of smart people and there are a lot of folks who know how to buy these things. Let's get them together, figure out how to do it better, and then stand down perhaps the rest of the vehicles that are out there, so we just have the best in class that we can order from.
So there's a lot of data that you just cited about the number of procuring offices and the types of categories. From a GSA perspective, Mary, what do we do in those categories? How do we actually understand what the categories are, get access to the data, and then present that to the buying marketplace?
So I think one of the, right out of the gate, and I started with Leslie back in the Strategic Sourcing Initiative.
When we were 15. Yeah, 10 years ago. So I'll point that out. Thanks.
And what I've noticed through the evolution of how that's gone to what we're talking about today with these categories and the teams of people that are coming together across government, the biggest step we've made so far is just the fact that we're willing to talk, communicate, share information about what each other's doing. Yeah. Some of the things, and I think we'll talk about this, that we've seen so far across these commodity or category teams, I think the best example that we use a lot is the hardware team, right? A couple of years ago, OMB got all the big agencies in the room together that do either large enterprise-wide hardware contracts or government-wide contracts like NASA and GSA and components of DOD and NIH, and said, okay guys, just bring your contracts to the table. Let's see what each of us is offering. What kind of things are people buying? What prices are being paid for those very similar, laptop servers, desktops, the terms and conditions. At the very least, let's just share that. The original intent there was not to say, let's all throw our contracts on the table and try to get down to one or two. It really was just about knowing what we all have, what's out there, what's available to people, and starting to talk about some of the best-in-class solutions or how to at least present that information and that data in a way across government so buyers have an awareness and a place to go and at least compare and get information. To me, that's been just one of the biggest, I think, successes we've had so far is people are willing to now come together to talk and to really figure out how do we move this forward and what's the best way so that we get better, buying behavior and better deals for government, for taxpayers.
So let's take it from the concept then down into the implementation for an individual category. Let's take two categories. I know that you're involved in IT, again, I know you're involved in transportation, but it goes from parent OFP policy level, we should do this, to, all right, now let's get our arms around an individual area. How does it start? How do you get named to be a category manager? And then what do you do from there?
Sure. From here.
The SSLC, the Strategic Sourcing Leadership Council, is the governance structure that oversees the category management concept. And we are actually learning how to do that process as we develop the category management. The way that the transportation one was established was we took a look at not only the spend, but who the larger customers were and who had the expertise and how they actively managed it. Based on that type of dialogue with the SSLC and the primary principals, the assignment was made based on the overarching maximization, if you will, the optimization of the balance, stakeholders, expertise, mission criticality, et cetera. In DOD's case, the transportation came to us based on those concepts because of primarily expertise that we had in how logistics, transportation of things, people, et cetera, fits into our mission. We're also one of the largest buyers, and we had an actual dedicated organization in Transcom to do that. Now, I will add to that it isn't a win or a lose scenario. This is the lead among equals, if you will. GSA has a phenomenal capability that developed DDS 1, 2, and 3. So they are a partner in how we move forward in looking at what we're somewhat loosely coining as the next generation delivery solution, or DDS4, depending, we haven't assigned a name yet. So it's the responsibility has a name, but it is the first among equals as far as developing the team, all working to almost essentially create a rising tide that lifts all boats, especially in the category of transportation.
One of the other responsibilities as the category manager, so GSA is the IT category manager at the high level, is to really help agencies that have a requirement, regardless of, is it a product, is it service, what is it, to help them understand what the options are across the different contracts that are available, not just, as for instance, in our case, it's not GSA. Really understanding what that customer's need is, and then helping them sort of make their way through that process. And so, getting them to, if you're looking at a lease versus buy decision, or what are the considerations around software and user license agreements or enterprise license agreements, and then saying, and here's your available options to you, and looking at their requirement on an individual basis, and then steering them to potentially the right solution or set of solutions. So it's really about, as he said, the amongst equals and being agnostic and helping people make the right buying decision.
I think that one more thing, Chris, if I may, is that a major responsibility of the category manager is also going to be to understand the marketplace with market intelligence and understand and influence demand management. So a C story from the transportation environment is we had a huge amount of next day air service for parts that when Transcom actually started looking at the demand was only being used to mitigate the risk of a delayed delivery. It wasn't actually due until maybe a week later, but people were overpaying to get things there the next day so that they could sleep calmly at night knowing that it was there when it was needed on a week from Saturday. So understanding that, providing the tools, influencing the demand is all part of the category management responsibility.
So we got two examples. How many categories are there?
I think when we looked at the map, I think there were 10 or 12 super categories, I think, in the comments band. Is that more or less right? So when we looked at, this is a work in progress, of course, but like IT in particular, like there are huge subcomponents to IT. There's hardware, there's software, there's cloud services, there's a lot in there. And so I think we're getting smarter on perhaps the subcategories and then figuring out what the category strategy looks like. But there is about $270 billion in common spend. And so sort of, focusing on those opportunities where we have an opportunity to do better is probably the next step.
And I keep saying, we're also not trying to create artificial boundaries and force things into a category and force the buyer to understand, right? So if you go to Amazon, you might know what category of something it is you're looking for, but you might not. And you just want to be able to find it and buy it and see what your options are. So this really is, again, around providing that expertise around what people are buying, but not, we've done a lot of work to analyze that spend so far and figure out kind of how to bucket things the right way, but at the same time allowing the flexibility for the actual buyer when it's time to conduct a transaction.
So I got to imagine that there's a variety level of maturity on how far along each category is. Can you give me an idea on what some of the milestones are from concept into actual creation?
You want to do the hallway?
Yes. There are different levels of maturity, and there are different parts of federal spend that we've been focused on in more strategic ways for a longer period of time, and organizations that have developed that capability, and others where we're frankly getting started now to take a more careful look. And so we will tackle this in stages and in waves, and we were attempting to do it in a very iterative, agile, stealing some agile concepts from IT development. We also want the category management to be an agile management process. We're starting, some of the categories that are further along are in the IT hardware, IT software, and in the administrative services, namely office supplies and some of the more well-understood, strategically sourced categories that we've worked on so far. And we've worked to take the good work that these teams have done over the years and put them on display in category hallways. And so the hallways are being used not to be the way we do category management, but to be the end result of a lot of hard work to get demand managed, to get sourcing events done, to get markets understood, to get customer needs lined up, and to give a single place where the federal end user, whether it's a requirements owner or an 1102 buyer trying to execute a purchase, give them a common place to look for those good practices, those suggestions, those strong requests from OMB and the SSLC, so that we'll all be on the same page about where we think the better answers lie. Not the only answers, not the mandatory answers, but where we hope to nudge behavior in order to get better results for the taxpayer. So we will take this in waves, and we will never be done. And the categories, you ask how many, it's almost irrelevant to the end user if there are 20 or 45. It becomes a management construct on the backside. How are we going to talk to each other articulately about the attributes of the things we're buying, which will and should morph over time. There was no software as a service 15 years ago. So we need to be cognizant that the way we buy things will morph and will change. They will go from being equipment buys to service buys. And that's good, and we just need to stay flexible in the attributes of the things we're buying, to reveal those attributes to end users in a way that makes it very easy for them to get into good answers quickly.
So for the transportation category, can you talk a little bit about the milestones that you've reached so far and what you see in the future?
We are engaged in development of the hallway, so there is a communication component about that. What we are currently engaged in right now is making the data comparisons during runtime of the new DDS3 vehicle and comparing that with Transcom's, they call it the DOMEX vehicle, domestic delivery. And part of the category management structure blessed by the SSLC in transportation was that these things take time to develop. Data should be driving what we do. So we are gathering some data, some real-life data over the course of essentially 2 years while we concurrently talk the best of breed, if you will, amongst DDS and DOMEX, so that we can come together and issue a single vehicle solicitation if appropriate. We think that it is, but we're not even 100% sure based on the demand management of the military and their logistics and the civilian side, which is actually differentiatable in a couple of different areas. VA and drugs and state and passports have a different kind of requirement than just moving, a package of yellow stickies, et cetera. So what we did was, one of the things that came out of that actionable intelligence was, instead of allowing the 2 vehicles that were stood up to run on a base plus 5 years, we forced them into shortening their execution so that we would put a milestone down that we would move to the next generation, whether it's a single or a double or some combination of multiples, to drive the innovation and motivate the stakeholders. So we think that we're looking at, we just started this in October. We will have a full year set of data this time next year. We'll incorporate that into an ACT strategy, and then we should have an award in fiscal year 17 if the current milestones hold true.
So what I think is remarkable about that, when we started, we did domestic delivery first, and we couldn't even find the people to talk to at the agencies who are responsible for their delivery services. So we've gone from not being able to get an appointment with anybody at the agencies to a DoD civilian collaboration, and wherever we come out with a solution, I mean, just that journey itself has been pretty remarkable. So we need to speed it up, and we need to learn those lessons and put them into effect for a larger category, larger number of things. But it's just that transition from where we started to what Ken was talking about, which is really remarkable.
Say one other thing about, we've been very focused in strategic sourcing on price and value, and I think the thing that's evolving in category management is to look more broadly at total cost of ownership, including the duplication that we encounter when we all try to solve for X at the same time, the kind of costs that we drive into our supply chain, our partners trying to respond to all those duplicative requests. And we think that when we look at categories more broadly, reducing duplication, increasing the socioeconomic participation, bringing down price maybe, or increasing value, or doing some combination of those things, we think we give ourselves more powerful levers to move meaningful change in the acquisition environment than simply focusing on price alone or the number of contracts per se. We want to set targets that improve our policy posture and improve the outcomes for customers, not necessarily in that order. And that's really a different, I think, a more mature discussion than we were having 10 years ago on strategic sourcing. It's really important because we've never done damage to socioeconomic participation through strategic sourcing. I know there's been a lot of noise around it, but whenever we've strategically sourced something, we've improved the federal posture in that area in terms of the dollars going to small, for example. So it's important we keep our eye on those kinds of metrics to make sure we're doing the right policy things. And that does not mean getting to one contract or a single thing to rule them all. It means intelligently managing spend so that we're getting the best value out of it.
Good. So there are two topics there. One about the government getting its act together and buying smarter is obviously going to affect industry and affect suppliers, and it's also on the socioeconomic side. I'm going to skip that for now because I heard a word that we haven't used before, and it's going to influence the next conversation. So Ken, you said hallways, and so we've got categories, and you said hallways first. And so I know Kevin cares a lot about hallways and this new thing called CAP, and I want to understand how category management then connects to a hallway, and then what CAP is going to do to enable that on the GSA side.
Marvelous things. Category management is hard, right? It's a lot of change management, just getting everyone in the same communication page and getting organized and coordinated. And the idea behind the hallways, which is a part of CAP, is to give us that focal point from which to launch a change management campaign across government, to communicate, to engage community around whether this is working, not working, whether we have the good practices, whether we've identified all of the ways we could be managing our spend better. So there's a really important role that hallways have to play in providing a feedback loop and a communications platform for category management teams, and that's critical. But it's really a phase one kind of idea. We need to make the hallways over time evolve into more and more expert decision support and eventually evolving into what I've been calling the turbo FAR. We've simplified the tax code, which is big and complex, by having TurboTax, which asks you, did you get married? Did you buy a house? Did you have a child? It asks you the important questions that you need to know to trigger important events within that very complicated regulation. We need to be able to do the same kinds of things for the FAR. How big is it? Is it worth the quality trade? Where should I be starting to point my spend? Is NASA soup really efficient and fast at this, or are you better off in an Army chess? Or is this something that is an IT-70 specialty or something else? We need the expert decision support to help us through those complicated questions. And so there's an analytics piece that needs to fall behind this, a cognitive computing piece. There are 170,000 trials going on right now at the Mayo Clinic that are being studied and reviewed by a computer. And the computer is giving in real time interim results as to the results of these trials and giving diagnostic advice to doctors who are then using that to change the prescriptions they're giving to their patients. And there is no way without engaging new technology and new capabilities and new analytics, that any one doctor could follow 170,000 simultaneous trials. We have 5 million transactions going on per year in the federal government, and it's exactly the kind of problem that we think new technology can help us solve to get better onto the same page and to nudge our answers into better outcomes for our customers, our taxpayers. So that's, CAP is evolving toward the ability to help us, not just through the councils and the category management process, but through the feedback loops that we'll see in past performance and in other analytical trends to get to better answers over time. And it needs a lot of data for that. It needs a lot of input. It needs a lot of community feedback. And that's what we're trying to build with the CAP program.
So right now, the idea is, CAP is a future strategic play for the federal government, and GSA is a lead in building it. The question is, how do you get the data and contracts from other category managers and other parts of government into CAP, and then how do you get buyers to use that as the unbiased place to go look for whatever the category is that they're trying to spend?
It's a great question, and I wish I had all the answers for you, but we know we have an adoption strategy we need to build. You start by asking people for the data. You start by bringing the working groups together. You put the contracts in that we know are important. We start collecting more transactional information. When we started DDS1, we knew exactly nothing about our shipping profiles. Today, we know a tremendous amount about where 95% of our shipments go, why they go there, and so that enables a much more sophisticated demand management play, a much more sophisticated sourcing operation, and so we need to develop those capabilities category by category, working group by working group, and feed them into that kind of expert decision support mechanism that lets somebody who's new to the space, who's never heard of how to buy help desk before, to get very quickly down a learning path that might otherwise take them years and years of repeated successes and failures to get to the same quality of outcome.
So today, actually, I got to see an update of the hardware hallway. We launched it the end of September, right? September 30th, I think, October 1st. And at the time, like, you go in there, and literally there's a list of hardware contracts. SUB, Schedule 70, NIH, there's like, let's say there's 10 of them. And that's all the agencies that had contributed or authorized links to their websites. It had some content also around, best buying practices on some different things. The site I saw today was a very different site that had some slick tools added to it already, and it actually for me was like a wow factor. And so an example was, we talked about the FSSI hardware team and the agencies coming together to share their contracts and information. That team also released an RFI over the summer that I think they're getting ready to actually brief us out the results of this week on what they found in terms of the top configurations and standards and things people are buying. So that hallway is now updated with a tool that allows a buyer to select from 3 choices of tiers of kinds of laptops they might want to buy. There's like the standard, there's the lightweight, I'm probably getting the terms a little bit not quite right, but you get the point, and the performance or the ruggedized or whatever. And so a buyer can click on one of those and immediately, automatically, you see updated all the different agency contracts that provide a laptop in that sort of configuration, how many contracts there are, and then you can actually start to further subdefine what you're looking for. You want it to be a socioeconomic, like you want a small business reseller. What kind of features are you looking for? You start checking those boxes, and automatically the data is changing about what your options are from which agency contracts, and you can get price comparisons, you can see all the different contract terms. It was pretty wild, and I thought that we have really come a long way because of our willingness to share that information and really work toward getting the buyers something that they can actually use. And when, we all know, if somebody finds something useful, or they've got, in some cases a passion about it and feel that they can contribute, they're going to be part of that community. And that's what we're really hoping to build some momentum around this as people start to use these things and even help us make them better.
That's right. And so a big part of the adoption strategy is the recognition we're starting with what we have, and we recognize we don't have everything. And a big part of the way we're reaching out now in greater and greater waves to broader numbers of federal employees is a recognition that we have what we have. We know it's not everything we want it to be, and we're never going to be done making this better. So please join and be an early adopter, be a thought leader, contribute your best practice, contribute the thing we're missing, to make this a more useful tool for all of your colleagues across government. And so bit by bit, we hope to use the kind of minimum viable product approach to continue to evolve and engage the community in making it more and more robust over time. So that, among other things, we're using this opportunity, this being ACT-IAC, I'll mention it, we are very much using this opportunity to test our ability to run agile development and to run the development through a series of user personas. We're engaging in real time with actual customers to give us requirements and build a backlog and manage through the backlog. And so we are learning our lessons about how to do development this way in addition to the work that it's resulting in. And so it's very important for us to be learning that technique as well.
So there was a concept earlier about a lot of contract proliferation, multiple IDIQs, GWACs, everybody having their own contracts. Fast forward 5 years, CAP full, implemented, ongoing, adding more stuff every day. Does this, in the long run, create a marketplace that you have data to reduce the number of cost of business, the number of contracts that are created in support of each individual activity?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we've even seen that at our current level of maturity, that we've moved the bar where we've been able to manage spend. We've been able to reduce duplication and increase the value to just every time without even having deep penetration into all the federal marketplaces. It's been an improvement. So our question is, can we touch more faster, and can we drive adoption more broadly, more quickly, because we want to make those savings available as soon as we can to as great a number of people as we can. And I think there's no question we can and will do that. And we will make mistakes along the way. We will have our setbacks along the way. And I think that's just got to be part of the learning curve.
And when OFPP did the open dialogue back in the spring on how to improve acquisition, the one thing that we heard over and over again is that the government has a whole lot of contracts with the same vendors. I mean, in some cases, we have thousands of contracts with the same vendors for the same thing, right? So that's not good for anybody. It's administratively burdensome for us and for industry, and we heard very clearly that there must be a better way to do this. And so rationalizing the space in the way that Kevin is talking about helps us to get to even a fewer number of contracts with the same vendor. I mean, that's just, that would be sort of a very easy kind of win right there. But then going after what contracts perhaps are not performing to the extent that we would like, and then, trying to either make them better or just use the ones that are performing well.
We have big problems in the federal government. I mean, we are trying to move out into the solar system and beyond. We are trying to secure world peace around. I mean, and we don't need 250 separate work groups trying to figure out office supplies, and trying to figure out. I mean,
we thought it would be so easy, but it wasn't.
Apply some of that good thinking to getting people to Mars. It's much more interesting. And so I think that's really what we want. We've got resources in the acquisition space, but we need to apply them to the really big and interesting stuff.
Right.
And let's not all try to recreate the things that we ought not to be doing.
So it's logical, but it hasn't happened. So here's the challenge, obviously, was getting your act together and finding all the data and deciding what you're going to focus on first. But there's a second challenge here. Rooms full of a lot of people from industry who have a stake in the matter as well. And so, I do a lot of buying, and, generally the kind of buying that I do, there's one winner and there's a bunch of losers. It's a zero-sum game. Everybody wins. And that person's really happy, and everybody is thinking, that'd be great if I was that category manager, because I'm the best at it. But how do we engage industry in order to allow them to participate at the proper level and reduce the administrative costs? How do we do this in concert with industry so that it's not a us versus them, it's not an antagonistic, it's not a protest-ridden process?
So, I think for the us versus them kind of thing, when we were doing the strategic sourcing where there were sourcing events, I think it was fairly contentious. It was sort of disrupting how we bought things. I think in this model, we've got more folks who can participate, right? It's just a bit more managed kind of participation. And so going back to what OFPP has talked about for a long time, which is the myth busting, is getting vendor engagement up front and early, having them help us advise on what these categories look like. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What do we always put in solicitations that drive you crazy, that drive the cost up? How can we do this better from your perspective so that we do have better, lower cost solutions?
So in my organization, in ITS, FAS has had its own focus separately from the government initiative on category management. And I think within FAS, we've got 17 categories across the 3 business portfolios. But what that's meant to me is, ITS, if you're familiar with us, we've traditionally been organized around contracts and some program stuff, but you've got, a big Schedule 70 program, we have a GWAC program, we have telecommunications program, which has multiple contracts, and many of you have multiple contracts just with my group. And we've kind of gone to market that way with our customers, and we've tried to sell contract solutions to a customer, which at the end of the day, we all know a contract's got to be used to make a transaction and a purchase. But what we're doing is using it as an organizing principle to say, what kinds of contracts would we need to offer customers the telecommunication solutions that they need based on where the market's going, how cloud has come in and sort of changed the way people are buying, what's happening in the satellite industry, what are the possibilities? And so looking at it from more of a program or a market perspective, and then saying the contracts are the underlying sort of foundational aspect, and a category manager might have access to one or more contracts, but purposely looking at the next contract we're putting in place to how it's going to support a category or multiple categories, rather than just saying, boy, this GWAC's expiring, it's time for a new GWAC. Well, the GWAC is expiring, and it might be time for a new GWAC, and we're looking at that, but now we're looking at it in context of what category would it support, right? IT services, that's where the GWACs, that's where people, go to buy when they're looking at large, complex IT acquisitions. But what are the other solutions that are already in that space today in other agencies? Let's get all the agencies together and say, what does the future of how we need to procure IT services look like? And then, what kind of sourcing events would we agree on that need to happen? So it really, again, is forcing the conversation, the communication, rather than GSA saying, well, we've got to put a new contract in place, and another agency saying, our contract's expiring, now we're going to put a new contract in place. So we're using it just even internally to figure out what the future of ITS solutions looks like, and again, how to make more sense of those and plan them more purposely.
If I might, as I look out, I see a lot of nods so far. I'm going to see if I can throw some scowls out there. Okay. I look at it in a slightly different fashion, yet still supportive of everything that's been said. The market intelligence for the categories should drive our behavior and our capabilities. And in some markets, there should be winners and losers. And we should not try to falsely apply that to where there shouldn't be. But in transportation, as an example, we have industrial-based considerations that office supplies would never consider. We've got the civilian reserve aircraft requirement to move troops in event of national emergencies. So it's never our intent to drive anyone out of business, but in managing that industrial base, I'm going to make different decisions inside the transportation small delivery arena than would be made in, say, something that is very commoditized with low differentiation, low barriers to entry, in which case there will be winners and losers. And another component of that is small business footprint. If we have data that demonstrates that it's a small business world, then I'm engaged within the department with the small business group that we ought to have higher requirements as far as the percentage of spend. But if we've got somewhere that there is no small business footprint and all we're doing is trying to drive subcontracting, we should be mature enough in our data understanding and our relationships to make the decision and be transparent about it that we're not going to go through the trouble of going to small business because it's not cost effective, it's not meeting the mission. But no one size fits all. But I think that there has been a lot of kumbaya, it's, everybody wins. That I don't think is going to be the case. Sequestration, as an example, is a very real thing. We've seen our spend come down already. It's going to continue to get worse, and people will become more and more motivated, and I think kind of in a Lord of the Flies-esque kind of thing, that we would be running around the building with face paint and sharpened pencils and pointers, trying to weaponize laser pointers.
Why not schedule 7?
So, but what is the operating philosophy here? Is it that the marketplace will create such a value that the buyer will be compelled? I mean, when I need to go buy stuff in bulk, I go to one of the warehouses because I know I'm getting a good deal. So I'm choosing. I can choose any of the warehouses, but I'm still getting the value that I seek. Or will it eventually drive down to, you got to use this delivery service. You don't have a choice. I mean, when I ship something, I pretty much have the envelopes in my room, and it's got to be this one because we chose that this is the one. What's the dynamic between me having choice and me having to order just because you said this is the deal and you got to take it?
Interestingly enough, I think that it's somewhere in between the two. The reason being is that one of the hallway tools that we are envisioning, that Kevin talked about a little earlier, is, to really oversimplify it, think Amazon. Okay, when you go to Amazon and you're looking for something, it pulls up a whole list of things that might meet that requirement, and it gives you all kinds of different options about what you can add and what it costs and what you want to take off and what it costs, and even down to the shipping. I need this tomorrow because I forgot that it's my anniversary. I'm willing to pay a little bit more. I don't need it until Christmas. All I got to do is have it here by the 23rd so I can get it wrapped. So conscious decisions, tools that bring value with conscious decisions to help the user. But I contrast that with currently unmanaged spend is often the bumper sticker that anyone with $1 and a willing contracting officer can go get that. All they're concerned about is, and it pains me to say this, you would think it would be purchase price. It's not. It's how quickly can I get rid of this money that's going to expire on the 30th of September. And that's no surprise to you guys, I know. So oftentimes, the price that they would be willing to pay on the 3rd of October is an entirely different price than they're going to pay on the 29th or 30th of September. We need to be able to drive behavior that they are not only thinking about the budget and the value to them on the price, but the life cycle cost. Because we're stovepiped right now, and these decisions get made in that stovepipe, often to suboptimal decision points about when is it going to expire, how bad do I need the requirement, et cetera. That's not necessarily well thought out, well rationalized, or actually in support of a broader mission. So I think that we're going to try and marry up those kinds of concepts, and that is my thought of what a hallway should really offer.
Ken, I think you're right. If I could just say, and I think you're right about ultimately there being winners and losers. At the end of the day, this is procurement. That is the job of procurement, is to make a meaningful distinction among offers, and we're all adults, we get it. I think what we owe the community and ourselves in getting to that answer and how we craft the strategies and the approaches we're planning to take is the kind of Mythbusters approach to being transparent about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and so that we can get the feedback back from industry. Hey, have you thought about industrial base? If you went and did what you said you're going to do, you'd be doing something that is maybe optimizing the value here, but you're creating additional risks or other problems. That is the kind of dialogue I expect we'll start to get especially as we mature down the second and third iterations of some of these sourcing events, because yeah, then you're into craft, and you're into, you really have now issues that you need to grapple with at a level of sophistication. You cannot toss it all out and rely on the randomness of the market to sort of take care of some of that. Right. And so I think there'll be winners and losers, but I think we'll owe you a whole conversation around it, and it won't be something that's done hastily or without a lot of transparency in the process.
So the acquisition system has a protest forum.
Sure.
It's a healthy aspect of any procurement system. Sure. I spend lots of time enjoying it. In terms of the total cost to the government for procurement activity, for inefficiency in the marketplace, is there anything that should be done around protests that would hasten the adoption of categories and hallways, or is what we have right now, that's the deal, operate within it, expect that, there's going to be challenges from potential unsuccessful offers, and then drive forward after there.
Are you offering to fix it, Leslie?
Sure, I'll just write that one down. I do think protests are part of the landscape, and we certainly dealt a lot with that during the sourcing events for strategic sourcing. And in some cases, it's extended, the time for us to get a solution in place. And so I think everybody's sort of aware of that. But it's part of doing business with the government. I think there's certainly lots of good reasons. And I think in this category management approach, where you may not be talking about a sourcing event necessarily, right? So it's not going to be perhaps as much at play as it perhaps was during our FSSI during the early years.
It's healthy. We need it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to do it. And I think it's on us to make sure that we're running clear, clean, transparent acquisitions when we're doing sourcing events. We're going to get the protests anyway, but that's okay. But we need due process.
Cool.
It's all right.
All right. So we have some questions from the audience. I see right here, Mr. Donaldson would like to raise a question. All right.
So the landscape's changed in the last 10 years.
And every year since then, we did a Books Act way back in the day where, everything was consolidated, pushed all the IT back out. So we're doing strategic sourcing. Now we come to the place where we're looking at categories. Within each agency, though, if you're going to go to be the honest broker, agnostic of contracts, and try to find the best value for your agency, most agencies have a use my vehicle first policy. Are you looking to break that down? And then as a kind of a follow-on, if you kind of fast forward to the next 10 years after you're done the first holistic round of this, can you envision where we have, to use a DoD term, purple organizations buying for different agencies?
Go right ahead.
We started kind of with the strategic sourcing. We're kind of morphing to a best-in-class kind of environment. And you're absolutely right that every agency says, use mine first. Even if they don't have one, I'm going to go build it, because it's just sort of the natural inclination, I think, culturally, to build it here. I think what Kevin and the group is trying to do is using data and information and pushing us to get that information in such a way that a contracting officer can digest it, that it would be a lot easier to say, well, I really don't need to stand up something because there's something that needs 80 to 90% of my need right here. And I will say that you would think we would have had that information, but it's very hard for contracting officers to find the vehicles out there that might meet their needs. We did an interagency contract directory a number of years ago in response to the GAO high risk for interagency contracts. And that was like the first step, but it's very hard. You can put in, I want to buy pencils, and it comes up with this long list. You have no idea how to differentiate between what this contract is offering and what another one is, the fees and the T's and C's and all that. So just the very step of putting the good, the big interagency contracts and then figuring out what the best in class are up for a contracting officer or program manager to look at. I mean, it sounds really simple, but we haven't been able to do it. And so focusing on that may give another dimension to that. Gosh, let's reach for the agency solution first. Well, you know what? Go check the hallways or the cap or the system and see if there's something that doesn't meet the need. And if there isn't anything, then yes, you should certainly stand up something.
So how far will CAP go then? Will it be information about contracts? Will it be ordering, requisitioning? Will it tie into financials? And what's the the end goal here where you're operating?
We want it to evolve into being able to tie in, and in fact, even the tool Mary was talking about that is helping people to select the standard IT laptop configuration that was defined by this interagency group led by NASA. What we've done is to say, well, if that's the standard configuration and we know it's available here on Chess, and we know it's available on Schedule 70, and we know it's available here in SOUP, we'd like to be able to take that requirement then, that standard configuration, and generate a that would be suitable for any of those particular vehicles to go use. And we are in the process of being able to generate an automatic e-buy answer right now. We're ready to do soup bowl, and we're ready to do a chess order. The point being, if the interagency tells us that the best way to go get your ruggedized laptop need met is through the Army chest, because they're really good at it and they buy a lot of them, we want to make it easy when you click that button to get ruggedized, that this thing is popping up in the chess world, and we're leveraging our spend that way. And you asked the important question, you know, are agencies going to be willing to get out of the business that they're in some place? I don't know. I know for sure GSA is really willing to think about it, no fooling for real, because we think that even if there are areas that we may need to exit, if we're allowed to exit in some cases, in order to have another agency be the agent for the government on that, we still think it's good for GSA, because there are certainly other areas where maybe if we're really playing square with each other, there will be other agencies exiting areas that are in GSA sweet spots. So, I mean, I think it becomes a win-win-win if we can get to the right data-driven decision-making.
But, yeah, but I also think that one element that's been missing is the performance piece, right? How well is an agency doing as a service provider? How well is the contract vehicle doing? Is it written with the right flexibilities? How well is the contracting officer and the program manager doing? So that data, if it barely exists now, but showing it to a contracting officer so that you can compare, you know, SOUP to NITAC, or, you know, to some of these other, that's never been done. And so I think people reach for that vehicle internally because they don't have this information, and that's kind of what we're
What we learned in our user interviews is it's not even, I mean, people say, well, are you in competition with SOUP? Well, yeah, you know, at some level there's that appearance. I don't think that's really the competition. The competition is with the 70% of the spending that goes full and open, because someone is so busy they don't have time to realize the work's already been done. I mean, it's the same problem you have in some of the open source world. You know, it's hard to reuse code because it's hard to know what's already been built. How do you reveal that there's something useful already out there? So we're trying to make it much this interagency contract directory, make it much easier to know, oh, that work's already been done. I can just move to the next step. I don't think our competition is with other big contracting shops. I think it's with the poor person who has no time to search whether it's already been done or not. And so we want to solve for that. And I think we lift all boats in doing that.
There are two concrete examples to demonstrate how we are beginning to move from current state to future state, as you mentioned. The first is the Senior Sourcing Leadership, Strategic Sourcing Leadership Council is evaluating its business case process, because my characterization, not the SSLC's, was that the business case was too focused on the 5% that was different and not enough on the 95% that was the same. There were some questions about timing as well, but that is secondary to this. So we're now looking at what's the same. The second thing is an active dialogue and breaking down the traditional expectations. DDS delivery services was a bit of a surprise when it came to DoD. But on the flip side, while it's not a category management, the Air Force is committed to buy $1.5 billion of engineering services through the OASIS contract. So there are strengths elsewhere outside of the usual suspects, the normal environment, that we think will build capability and allow the mission owners to focus on those things that are really good, that they're really good at. So Transcom, transportation, that makes sense. Engineering is engineering. Where's OASIS? They got a whole project team. Let them do it. So I think that will continue to evolve over the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Another question in the back here?
Yes, can we imagine an environment where there might be one agency that was responsible for the general procurement process, that was sort of their mission, while NASA had an aeronautics and space mission and NIH had a health mission? And is there any concept of an office?
Could you be clear?
I'll let y'all take that.
That's far out.
That's disruptive.
I'll have some whatever he's having.
The General Services Administration. we just talked about. We've evolved over time.
But, I think, in all seriousness, yeah, of course, but I think the question is how to do that. Is it to go back to Brooks Act kind of thinking that it all has to be done through one organization and it all has to be mandatory? I think we've learned that's not a good approach. So the real question is, how do we develop a facilitated, central-led approach? How do we, even if GSA is the general buyer for a lot of those things, and the NASAs and the DODs are doing really cool stuff in other areas, that's fine, but I still don't think GSA is supposed to be the only place where expertise resides. It's the catalyst for the bringing together of expertise wherever it resides in the private sector, in the public sector, in the reaches of the regions, in regional operations. And so we really need to think again about what it means to be a centralized anything. It's got to be center-led, but collaboratively built and driven, and the customer's front and center at all times. That it's their need that needs to get met, right? If we can't keep this in the center of our mind, we'll be fighting over whose silo, and that's not a fruitful discussion.
Yeah, I think that's, you made an important point about GSA to help facilitate and provide a place where agencies can go, and we can, help manage it so that the cost isn't on other agencies, but the ability for people to find stuff across agencies is there. But what we also want to do in this community is bring buyers to be able to talk to each other, right? That's one of the biggest things is, as we said, there are tens of thousands of people buying across government. They most of the time don't have access to somebody, in another part of the Pentagon, much less somebody in another agency. So that was a part of the vision too, is just to be able to help hook people up. Somebody's maybe at a solicitation, we can post really good examples of solicitations and templates and point people where to go if they have questions about, what the considerations were and what the agency used, why it was successful. So those are some of the other things that we think GSA could do, is to just connect people in general to people resources.
Mr. Dorbeck, you're sitting over there logging away. What's the question I didn't ask?
Why didn't you put me on the spot?
Because you always put all of us on the spot. No?
Oh, my God.
What's the meaning of lying?
42.
I guess, I always wonder, how does this actually happen? Because everyone's out there they're out there working, doing their jobs, and trying to figure out how to buy things in the best way possible. And yet it still feels so complex and difficult and way too cumbersome. And how does this make it easier?
So the CAP team's been out doing interviews with people who own we're really focusing the hallways on the use case that I'm a requirements owner who's been asked to stand up a help desk. I've never done it before. How do I do it? Just one of the conversations I sat in and watched was a guy, a VA employee, excellent contracting officer. I think he's been in the business 4 years, and he's already doing big and important things. But he talked about the pile of recs that he's got on his desk, and from 1 second to the next, he needs to become an expert in gardening services, and then he picks up the next rec, and I got to learn about IT application rationalization services. Okay, got it. And then he's picking up the next rec, and he's on to, I got to buy some hardware or some fence replacement parts for, and he literally talked about the need to become an industry expert in 5 minutes on each, and he was really sharp, and apparently is doing quite a nice job picking up enough to be really dangerous in the way he goes, and really good at it, frankly. But he needed help, and he said, I don't have enough time to become an expert in each of these areas. And we've got our buying built that way right now. Far too many people in our acquisition workforce that are being asked to dive in and become experts in areas they have. So this is a way to take some of that pressure off of that one person. I can see his face. He said,
What's his name? They're knocking about 25 job offers.
But he said, if I had tools like this, it would really help me. And so he was helping to design this with us. And I don't know that we're going to be able to ever make it less complex, but I think we can use expert decision support, we can use communities, and we can use well-trod paths down the corridor here, I think, to make the job a lot easier for a lot more people. It'll never be perfect, but I think just like building some of the IDIQs in the background, or the schedules program has taken some of the cost and time out for end users. We need to continue to make that end user journey shorter and easier and more transparent all the way around. And that's how we'll get it. We'll never, until someone comes and says we're going to be able to procure things without any consideration to supply base or fairness or transparency, and I wouldn't wish those things on us, then we're going to have complexity. This is a complex market. It's a complex country. It's a complex government. So let's work together to take the complexity out where we can on those things that are common, and save the complexity for the really cool stuff that we know we need to do also.
Got a question in the back?
So, general services, in terms of how you are providing that to all the different agencies, like NASA should focus on going to space and GSA focus on buying those general services that every agency is using. So when you're going out and doing these categories, you're collecting a bunch of experts who know how to buy it best. And for telecom, for hardware, software, and you award contracts and say, we figure out the best contract possible for agencies to buy from. So that's that first step, but then afterwards they have to do task orders and do fair opportunities to buy those services. And there's a couple of different models, and if you go down the expert model, you could still have all the expertise in GSA to help them with the task orders and help them with the logical follow-ons, or are you going to try to offshoot that and let the agency still handle those? How far do you want to go with the expert model to provide those services? Since it is a shared service, it does make sense as you combine it, why not continue to do that even beyond the first initial award, but continue to do that in the task order process?
I have a remarkably unfulfilling answer of it depends. The concept of life cycle cost of the acquisition, how many task orders it is, how much workload are you going to generate, how much expertise do you need to put on each task order. Honestly, fees become part of our conversation as well. How do you pay for what we're trying to do in strategic sourcing? So the life cycle cost, we don't have an answer yet, but based on DDS3 and DOMEX, relatively non-complex, fairly straightforward, that's probably a delegated authority, let them order. But if it's an engineering services where you really got to talk about rates and verification of credentials, et cetera, that probably needs to be something that's a little more centralized. And I think that it is that balance against resources, complexity, and risk. But it's all tied to life cycle cost.
And there's different roles throughout this sort of framework. So the IT category manager role, for example, is GSA convening a group of people across government that have some knowledge around IT, hardware, services, whatever it is, that the sourcing event itself might be a different agency that's leading that sourcing event, or the next sourcing event, I should say. And then under that, we would look at what the buyers might actually need in terms of potential support services, and again, figure out where does that reside, or is it different, depending on the requirement, or maybe the agency doesn't need it at all because they've got the expertise to do it at the order. So it's whatever resources the category manager and then the sourcing manager can provide to help the subsequent transactions that have to happen is the things that we're thinking through.
Well, we already do a lot of that simplification on the supply system, where you're able to define your requirement. And I think our next real challenge ahead of us is how do we do more to define service catalogs. We do a decent job with our product specification. I don't know. We define product specifications, okay? And we take the sourcing event out of the end user's way. I don't need a sergeant who's trying to replace a wrench on the flight line to know much about procurement. They stick a requisition in and it comes out of a virtual bin and it gets shipped to them. And that's pretty efficient, right? And there's somebody there who's the wrench manager. Who knows wrenches, knows parts, and is getting the good value on that. How much of that could we do with software as a service under a shared services approach? How much of that could we do for other well-defined services that could be bought off a service catalog? I think that's our next series of things we need to really start paying attention to. We really need feedback from industry. How mature is industry in defining some common standards around some of these services, and letting us, as quickly as possible, get to a place where we could take acquisition out of the way of our end users so they could get a more retail buying experience for more and more complicated things. I think that's what everyone's clamoring for. So how quickly can we get down that path?
Two of the questions were directed at the way of where's GSA going to extend and how far are they going to extend into it. So the supposition is that GSA is going to solve the acquisition process, but that's really not the point. Acquisition is as much of a mission enabler as the people that are on the ground doing it, because we get our jobs done through the contractor and supply base. So it's not extension and elimination of acquisition, it's removing the hollowing out and the duplication from acquisition so that they can focus on it.
And helping our buyers be smarter, right?
Steve Kellman wrote
Get
it.
smart, buy smart.
Yeah, get smart, buy smarter. Yep.
Steve Kellman wrote a thing, I think Computer Week, Federal Computer Week, about it's the requirements, stupid, I think is how it says. And, and it really is. I mean, so if we could get to in that 270 billion that's common, if we could find the 80% of that that's really, really common, or even the 50% of it, what a huge win that is. If we could define really solid requirements, really solid service level agreements, really solid, and put that onto a fast path to a shared service or to a shared approach to acquiring it, we could do a lot of good.
But I think having a category manager who really knows this space and knows what's out there, it may be that our requirements are what they've always been, but maybe they're not right anymore.
Right.
Maybe there's another way to do it that we just are not familiar with.
Right.
And so having somebody who has enough sort of outside experience or has ways to get that will be incredibly important in figuring out how to do it the next time and do it better. Right.
We got probably time for one or two more questions.
Okay, is this on? So Kevin, I want to kind of dig into something that you had said a moment ago, maybe ask you to elaborate a little bit. And to some extent, this question gets into the degree to which the category management concept extends beyond just GSA and CAP and these hallways and out into the agencies, right? Because the use case example that you just provided of the fellow at the VA who 1 minute is buying gardening services and then the next minute has to be an expert at software rationalization seems to me to be, perhaps a little flawed or perhaps there's a more fundamental issue there with regards to whether or not somebody really ought to be having to do that from 1 minute to the next. And so I'm curious, though, what have you seen as you're out there, talking to agencies with regards to agencies starting to develop specializations or category management expertise within their own procurement workforce? And how do you reflect upon that in terms of the question of, is it really right to be building these hallways with the notion in mind that you're building it for people who have never bought those things before?
So I actually was using that as one example of dozens and dozens of people that we've been out in different agencies talking to. Not everyone is buying that way. So I think the way agencies are organizing themselves to buy is probably as varied as the number of acquisition approaches and solutions that are out in this duplicative marketplace. There's a lot of variation of approach, of quality, of experience, of policy, of a lot of things. So that is not the use case we're building for. It is one story that we heard that fits a user profile, a persona that we developed in working through how we could tailor this site to meet a need. But a lot of people, so part of what we want to draw in is if there's a buyer who is very experienced in buying software asset management rationalization services, and they come into our very naive hallway today and say, there's one interesting article here about how to do this, but you guys you've missed it. I've done this a half dozen times, and I've saved $50 million in my agency. That's the person who we want next to comment and say, you guys have missed it. Here's the good practice that should be there, and we're going to welcome them into our community and put their examples up and put them in charge because they are providing the value that other guy in the VA who's just trying to learn it in 5 minutes needs. And I may have it in GSA, I may not, but I want to create the platform where that can be available to each of the people coming into the hallway.
But you bring up a really good question about specialization, right? And so as we were refreshing the certification programs this year, we've introduced this notion of Core Plus, and I know DoD has done this as well. But like in IT in particular, or in services acquisition, because we buy so much of it, does it make sense to start to specialize? And what does that mean? Right, so in IT, there's a whole lot of different ways that we can train a contracting officer or a program manager in Agile, in how to buy cloud services, because they're different, right? How to buy cybersecurity, how to make sure that those contracts have the right clauses. And so there's a lot that's very specialized in certain areas, and so maybe we need to have this Core Plus model where you've got micro-credentialing or special training and development or apprenticeships or whatever it is in these areas, and so that you start to specialize around some of these big categories. But that doesn't mean that you become an expert. You can contribute to the hallway. If tomorrow they need you to buy gardening services, well, maybe the hallway will help you with that. But I think they're really looking at how to specialize, because it's becoming so complex that I don't know that there's another way.
And I also think that it's part of the alignment between the complexity and the mission. And maybe not the complexity, that's not the right word, but if this individual is buying all of these different kinds of things, even though he or she may not be an expert in it, if that person is an expert in the mission and you need to know how those things interrelate, yeah, you need to know all of those things, in which case the hallway is a great resource. And it goes to the program management. But I also think, though, that there are other areas where we don't need to be experts, but we have we've created them out of alignment with the end outcome and our expectations.
Last question over here.
Yes, hello. I'm Troy Yussing, the Federal Times. Since you put my former boss, Christopher Dorbeck, on the spot, I thought I'd jump into the fray. This question is for the GSA folks, and as you move forward with your next generation telecommunications strategy and contracts, how do you see Network Services 2020 sort of fitting into CAP and category management?
So the Network Services Program is one of the categories that we've got in ITS, and we are treating it just like all the other things that we help agencies buy. So NS 2020 is really all about the future and the strategy for delivering the services within our program area, and that's everything from organizational change to system changes to, as many of you know, lots of new contracts coming. So again, we're looking at those things and rationalizing them in terms of what the customers need, what's already out there, where things are going. How do you replace expiring things? What kind of services will people need to be buying around, traditional network services, given where content delivery networks are going and data is really taken off, and IP. So it's just another way in which, and I think, and for our purposes, the telecommunications category and the management and the expertise that we have is probably very much more mature than some of the other areas, because we've been delivering those services in terms of sort of a category for quite a long time. We just haven't really formally called it that.
Mary didn't say it, but she's done a tremendous job in her team putting together a real focused customer engagement process for
industry and
a large part of this is not just what we buy and what's coming in the new, but how do we make that buying experience easier and really make sure that we're thinking through the entire structure of the program from soup to nuts to take away, learn lessons from where we've been and do better going forward, which is the essence of continuous improvement and category management.
I think that is all the time we have for our panel, so thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Chris, for a great job moderating, and what a terrific set of remarks from our very insightful acquisition leaders. Let's thank them once more. And thanks also to Debbie and the program committee for putting together this terrific program. To all of you for coming, to your companies, of course, to our sponsors for ACT that make so much of this possible. Next week is Thanksgiving, so in that spirit, we hope you have a great holiday and a great holiday season. Our next meeting as a membership community will be on January 21st in 2015, so we wish you a Happy New Year. I know we'll see you at various events along the way, and we, of course, will now adjourn to, I think, the room across the way, which is, I believe, on the next slide, called Constitution B. I got a sneak preview of that room. Right there we go. So please join us for a networking reception, and again, thank you for coming.